Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Karl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller and Associates CPAs, Jeff Cromendike of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info at expertnetworkteam.com.
And we encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Nathan Merrill, attorney at Goodspeed Merrill, and I'm here with Karl Frank of A&I Financial.
Hey, Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well, and
Excellent.
Today we're going to carry on in a theme sense from our last podcast where we talked about headwinds, more the business headwinds and kind of emotional, professional headwinds that we might encounter. Gave some anecdotal framework in the things that I'm facing. But today we're going to shift on the headwind side, and I'm going to turn it over to you to help to describe what we may mean by this. But today we're going to be talking about economic headwinds. So when just to frame our discussion, how would you define economic headwinds such that we can help people understand how these are going to impact them?
You know, I think it's a great question. The economic headwinds of which we're going to speak is just business downturn. So our topic and our listeners are largely business owners and are running a small business or a manager in a business and worried about making money and how they're going to keep their people employed and keep their supply chain running and paying their taxes and growing their firm and staying strategic in a world where all the news is bad and it looks like the economic recession is coming upon us. But we're going to dive into that in greater detail. I can't wait to come out of here. I may be the only optimistic voice that you hear, and so we should have a lot of fun today.
Well, I find sometimes that optimism is just a byproduct of the amount of time you allow yourself to perceive the problem, right?
I love that. So has there ever been a problem that hasn't been resolved eventually? I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. The 2008 stock market crash was terrifying in countless ways. And you look back at it and the market's 4 times higher even after.
Well, in the 1987, was it 87?
87, Black Friday. We thought it was the end of the world.
And you look at that. I was actually explaining this to my son as he's built up, my college-age son has built up some capital that he wants to put to use.
Good for him.
I said it's an interesting time to try to find the right way to put to use.
Oh, yeah.
So
maybe he can talk to my son because my son spends more than he even has.
But what I did was I said, okay, you're going to put it in the market now, and the market may still drop some.
Right.
And so if you look at what you've just done, you'll look at where it went in, and you'll look where it's at. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled out the graph of this particular fund we're looking at.
Good for you, yeah.
And I said, okay, here's the 5-year view.
Yeah.
Here's where we're at now. Here's where it was 5 years ago. There's a significant positive return in there. Then I pulled it back further to 10 years, and then I pulled it. And that's why I say optimism, more or less, is just a product of time frame.
Time frame. I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Because you can go back to the worst day in the 87 crash, and you'd be a millionaire today. You could have bought in like the day before the crash, and you'd be a multimillionaire today.
Yeah, expand your time frame long enough, and everybody's an optimist. I wish that were the case. Well, somebody told me recently. I read this. This is a great quote that I love, and I'm using it in one of our recent periscopes. Pessimists sound smart, but optimists make money. I love that quote.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of truth in that, and think about this. I mean, if you've got a market that goes from bottom left to top right in dollars and time over a long period of time, you just need that long period of time. We'll talk about it, a different day about if you don't have enough time. But now you've got an opportunity where you're on that chart somewhere and you're down 20, 21%, something like that since the beginning of the year, since the peak of the market. You've got an even better chance here in the future of making more money because now everything's on sale. And what's going on right now, which is really interesting in the economic, and this just happens to be the time and the week, and we're doing this in July 2022, where earnings season is coming out, and the expectations were, earnings are going to be bad because the stock market's bad. So the stock prices, people think are betting on future earnings, and so if they're down, then earnings must decline too. But that's not actually what's been happening so far this earnings season. The earnings have been coming out really strong. So now you're getting better earnings at lower prices. Eventually, these stock prices are going to catch up. Eventually, they're going to turn around. Eventually, people are going to become more confident. We're not there yet.
Well, if you don't believe that, going back to your pessimist, a pessimist farmer does not plant a crop. He just assumes it's all going to die, and it's also manifest in what I call the fear doctrine. That which you fear, you cause. So if you're a pessimist, you don't take risks, and without taking risks, you don't have opportunity for growth. You may hedge, you may stay in the same place, but an optimist sees opportunity. An optimist takes risk. An optimist takes action.
Yeah.
And creates the opportunity for something good to happen.
Why would you do anything if you think everything's going to be worse? Right?
Right.
You would just shelter down and hunker down and forget about the world and hope that somebody else is going to change something to make your life better. And that's miserable. That's just a vicious cycle of self-defeating behavior that's going to bring about exactly what you dread.
Right. That's why I say it's the fear doctrine of you cause whatever you fear. You don't ask the girl out because you're afraid she's going to say no. Well,
you never
have the opportunity. So the same result is what you fear. But anyway.
Well, I love the fear doctrine, and I think that's what's going on right now. And I love that 2-word phrase you just put on it because everybody's worried about the recession. So that may be what we bring about. We may bring about an economic recession, but I'm going to take 2 steps back from that and say, as pre-retirees or possibly retirees who might be listening, do you really care? What really affects you is what's affecting you in your stage of life. So it's your particular business if you're a business owner, and it's your particular retirement account if you're a retiree. It's your particular income in either case that's really getting you through this, right? It's only a short period of time that we're ever in a recession. It's not an ongoing natural phenomenon for human beings to not be growing. Growing is natural.
Right.
It's what we do. We don't regress. We grow.
And we could probably argue all the day long about what causes recessions. And in this one, I think one of the traditional arguments for the cause of a recession is probably more apparent than in other situations, which is just how the monetary system works. But that aside, the other thing that I think a recession creates, and I don't necessarily consider myself an optimist like you said you are, but the way I've always tried to view recessions is a repositioning of capital and labor, right?
Exactly.
It allows you to take out the inefficient actors or the inefficient investments and find a more productive place for it.
Yeah, you get your best opportunities in a recession. So I was fully employed in the .com crisis, .com rise. I was working for a company that would end up being bought 5 times in 5 years, and the eventual buyer was enormous. I went from employee 35 to 13,500 or something, right? And then the .com crash happened, and 100 out of 150 of us in the Golden office here in Colorado were laid off on a single day. And it's one of the best opportunities that ever happened to me. So it was a bad recession.
Yeah, it hurts to be redeployed as capital or labor,
it
but
was the worst. Yeah, it was the worst stock market crash. So my cubicle mate who made it through there, felt like an idiot because he just bought himself a BMW with his stock market earnings, and now he's like, oh dear, maybe I shouldn't have taken out that big loan to buy this big fancy car. You know, maybe not all these IPOs are going to go up 300% in a half hour every day for the rest of my career. Right?
Oh,
so
geez.
reality hit him hard, but
Right.
it hit me hard in a fantastic way. And it gave me the opportunity to go back and finish the master's degrees and start the firm that we're talking from right now, A&I Financial Services. And it's just been a great opportunity. And that's often what happens in recessions. The best ideas finally they take seed in the good times, but you don't plant them until the bad times. And you've got to have that optimism and that confidence. And in my case, you got to have a really good, spouse to help you through it too, because we'd never be here without her.
Yeah. Amen to that. So economic headwinds, getting kind of back to the core topic here, some of the economic headwinds that our listeners who are business owners might be facing, increased cost of
I think
goods,
increased costs are huge.
labor,
Yeah. And labor is huge.
borrowings.
And now mortgages and interest rates are going up. Of those, the only one that, none of them are permanent, right? All of these rising costs. So,
We were just talking
We
moments
were.
ago about
exactly.
you bought wood for a construction project 6 weeks ago. Now you're looking at significantly lower costs for the same amount of goods.
You and I are in business together, being a commercial building owner together, and I'm the one who's got to spend. Our team has got to spend a bunch of money improving our space this year, and we were terrified with the rising costs last year. I mean, it was just going up and up and up and up, and the lumber hit all-time highs. Lumber is down a lot, more than 30 or 40% from its high. It's almost halved from its high. It's a great time, actually, in comparison to what it was just a few months ago.
Right.
And a lot of other costs for producers are coming down as well. So that may be the case that if our businesses can stay in business, and like I'm telling you, earnings are not that bad. They're really good in some cases. Record setting. Companies are going to have lower input prices. They might not need to raise the consumer prices, and we could see lower prices in the future. So all of the of the three, they could definitely change. Another one is the labor cost, and that one I think is sticky. So I'm going to come back to it. What was the third one that we talked? Oh, mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are down over the past few weeks. They're up over the previous few weeks. I've learned to be really humble with interest rate predictions. That I've thought interest rates would need to be higher for over a decade. Now they're finally happening. So if the Fed does what the Fed said it would do, and there's a lot of reason to think that it won't, a lot of reasons to be suspicious. But if they do what they say they're going to do, you can expect rates to continue to rise. And that would
For a
be,
while.
Yeah. Right. And right now, as of the latest charts that I saw, maybe this morning, it might have been yesterday morning, it's less than a few hours old. The market, by and large, which is a better predictor of interest rates than the Fed, says that they'll raise through the beginning of next year, and then maybe they'll stop and maybe even start reducing interest rates next year. And that's
well, the
kind of
strange thing is, and we were talking about this on mortgages too, and this is something people should consider. Not that I give financial advice, but a 30-year mortgage is going to behave differently than a 15.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going to behave differently than a
Oh, yeah.
7-year ARM. So you can manipulate your interest rate exposure just like the banks do, just by picking
Exactly.
different terms and exposures.
I had a client last week tell me that they got a longer, as in like 30 or 20-year mortgage for a larger amount of money at a lower rate than they got for the 15-year not jumbo loan. And
Right.
it really depends on the bank. It really depends on what they want to sell. It's
Right.
all about the bank filling up and whatever the market is willing to offer.
Case in point, I just went out and refinanced a used auto, relatively old used auto. I mean, in my mind, it's brand
Yeah.
new, but it's 2011.
Yeah.
54-month loan for 2.49%.
Unbelievable.
That's basically like, in my mind, that's the bank paying me to
That's
borrow
like free money. Yeah.
because my money is going to devalue at the rate of 8%, and I'm paying them 2.5%. I'm like,
we have had really high inflation recently.
so on that note, I'm gonna give you maybe a curveball here. I just read an article today, and I don't know that the article is definitive, but raised an interesting question. I'd like to hear your perspective on this. Which is worse, an inflationary environment or recessionary environment? Because you're usually two halves of the same coin.
Yeah, they go together.
The whole risk we are facing in recession is the Fed trying to tamper down the inflationary elements of the overheated elements of our economy that are fueling inflation. There's a few other things that are fueling inflation that are not interest rate related, like labor shortages and things like that. But thoughts on which is worse?
I mean, this is where
or which is better?
Yeah, opinions, right? Where opinions matter, and forecasts are, worth the price you pay for them, and here we are for free. So take it with a grain of salt. But what we don't want is what we had in the 70s with
stagflation.
Well, yes, and what we had in the 70s was a well-intentioned Federal Reserve. So I can't remember the Reserve chairman before Arthur Burns, but
Volcker?
He was after Burns.
Okay.
But Arthur Burns, in many people's opinions, was the worst federal chairman ever to exist. But he was super well intentioned, and he was very active. And the gentleman before him who did basically the same thing got off the hook. But Burns was the stagflation. It was the guy during. And what happened was we had a recession, or fears of a recession. So he lowered interest rates. And then all of a sudden, inflation continued with the lowering interest rate, and they felt out of control. So then what did he do? He raised the interest rates, and the inflation got worse, and the recession got worse, and you had stagflation. So you had a Federal Reserve that tried to do everything, right? You had an organization that has a lot of power over only one thing, and it's one thing, this interest rate, the discount rate used by banks, is being magnified throughout the economy. So without clear direction and without consistency, you've got a massive problem. Now, the good news about that is that has been in the economic history books for 50 years, right?
So we're bound to repeat it, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that the men and women who are in charge today were in college when that was happening, right? They were starting their careers at that point in time. Or they've already retired, right? They have been studying this and fearing this and been treating this as the one thing you don't want to do. And so I don't think, actually, Nate, I think it's the opposite. I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have a Federal Reserve that does that, except that I also, for the past 20 years, have been thinking the Federal Reserve would start to raise rates. And, of course, they haven't until this year.
Right. And I mean, one could argue whether the rates are the bigger problem or the quantitative easing was the bigger problem.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if there's an argument there. I think that the amount of money sloshing around the economy is absolutely the reason we have inflation.
Which may have made the lack of rate increases less. I mean, there's been an invisible tax happening over the last 10 years with all the money coming into the system.
Yeah.
But the other unique, I believe this is a unique quality of our current economy relative to the 70s, is both the labor force participation rate and our unemployment rate.
Unbelievable. We have very low unemployment rate, and it's very low here, and it's staying low, and it's staying low across
Some would
industries.
claim that's a sign of a good economy. Your thoughts?
It is absolutely a sign of a good economy. It's a very strong sign of a good economy.
Except for it's inflationary.
Except that we continue to have price-wage inflation, and we've got wages going up, so prices are going up, so employers can pay these higher wages. And that's a positive.
Can we have a recession where there's still inflation? Is that the definition of stagflation? A recession, a low growth environment with rising costs?
Yes, right. So a declining GDP or a declining economy with rising costs is stagflation. But this is really different from that in that, well, we haven't had it yet, for one, but it is a possibility. There's a lot of possibilities. But what's interesting about this particular fear of recession, because it hasn't happened yet, right?
Maybe to confirm in a few weeks.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, because Q2 closed, right?
Right.
We either are or we aren't in a recession right now. We don't know yet.
Exactly right. And
Q1 was negative growth.
And you never know in advance. It's always, and the market's always betting. And the last recession we had lasted
9 months,
2 days and a few hours, right? It was the COVID recession, right?
Oh, that one, right?
Yeah, I mean, you forget all about it, right? It was so fast.
It was an artificial
It was
termination and resurrection.
It was so fast you forget all about it.
I think of the 2008, 2009 as dramatic as that was. It was still relatively
the recession
short.
part was super short. Exactly. The
the recovery was really slow.
It was the slowest of all time
Right.
by many, many measures. And the recovery from COVID was one of the fastest by many, many measures, like by order of magnitude, maybe faster, I think. But we digress. I think that where we're at right now, which is really unique, and I don't know how it's going to resolve, but I have a lot of confidence that when people have jobs, they will get optimistic. The optimism will return, and people have a lot of jobs right now. So maybe things are changing. Maybe our prices are out of control. Maybe there's a lot of political strife, and we've got a lot of war and just horrible things. The news is just bad all over, right? And so, of course, we feel bad. We feel less confident, but we're employed. By and large,
we could be in Sri Lanka.
Holy cow!
Not to digress even further, but
or Colombia. I mean,
But God bless America, right? We are in a very stable. Notwithstanding all the things that you can point to that are terrible about what's going on,
it's
right. Stable. It's solid. We are America.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Cue the music.
I know,
Henry.
I think we can get that in. I hope we can. Yeah, right. I mean, that's the beauty of where we're at, right? And we have the ability to build it ourselves. So we're extremely dependent upon technologies that already exist that we have offshored, that we're bringing back, and it's going to take a while to bring them back. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're not sitting in Europe depending upon liquid natural gas to be shipped from
Moscow
from America,
right,
without a liquid natural gas facility sitting in the shores of Hanover, Germany, yet to be built. Right, we're not in that position. We're not sitting in England wondering how in the world we ever allowed Boris Johnson to stay in power for as long as he is, and what are we going to do in now with a guy who says he's out of power at a time when we're looking at winter and we need a lot of natural gas, and we got nobody to make the decisions. Right, there's a lot of really wonderful countries and politics going on that are worse than ours.
Yeah, I've heard recently from someone who's widely traveled, like for people who don't like America, they need to travel.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a good time, by the way. The euro is basically $1 now.
Oh,
right?
Sweet.
This is 20% off sale right here going on. So if you want to go to Europe, now's the time. If you want to go to Britain, now's the time. And the pound is on a downtrend. So, maybe you want to continue, to go ahead and book those tickets.
Develop a little bit of patriotism in the process.
And you just might, right? You just might. I mean, Alex de Tocqueville was a Frenchman, and he wrote one of the best treatises about why America is wonderful ever to be written, right? And he just did it by coming here. Well, you could go there or go to the country that you think you admire the most and see if you still really do. It's a pretty good place to be.
Right.
Pretty good place to be. So, that's another headwind, though. So the stronger dollar is harder for exporters in America. So, but there's not a single company that we're working with that isn't already thinking about how they change that, about who their new clients are going to be. So if they're
how they're going to innovate, so their product is distinctly different.
And who their new clients could be. So if you are
because they're not building Teslas in France.
They're right, exactly. They're certainly not, and they're not. There's no plans to, as far as I know. But what do I know?
Well, right? Mercedes has got the EQ, so who needs a Tesla?
Seriously, it looks like a sweet car, and the Porsche car looks really good too.
Oh, the Porsche is very nice. I have met someone who's purchased that car, and it is
It's pretty nice, man.
Yeah,
it's a pretty nice car.
He's got the four-door version. I don't know if they make the two, but the four-door is just like it's a rocket.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful,
and it looks like a Porsche.
Which
I prefer that style to the Tesla style. I like a car that looks like a Porsche.
I think Elon does too. Actually, I think Elon said that was their number one competitor was Porsche.
He owned one for a while.
But who knows what Elon says, right? I mean, a couple days ago he was going to buy some internet company I heard of once, and now I guess he doesn't.
that story is that the final chapter on that book has not been written. That's so interesting to follow, both from a legal investment, social media. I mean,
it's bizarre.
I personally believe with the genius that Elon Musk, I think he's playing some people like a song. I think he's making out pretty well. He's not going to get stumped on this thing. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, well, he thinks so. He's definitely confident in his actions.
Pretty sure.
But
we'll see.
Who knows what's really going to happen?
Final chapter's not written yet.
Yeah, who knows about Elon? Not our problem. In any event, I'll give you a real life example of a client. So a client builds wiring parts, right? Parts that are only used by businesses to help build their products. And a lot of those products are then shipped overseas, right? So they're an exporter. Mm-hmm. So they're being hurt because a lot of currencies around the world are being devalued, especially relative to the dollar. And so all of a sudden his prices in overseas markets look a lot more expensive. Well, great opportunity for him. He would rather be onshoring anyway. All these companies that he has been avoiding in America because they're all getting their stuff cheap from China and everywhere else are looking for onshoring or looking to sell their products here or looking to reshore all of their... It's a great opportunity for him,
sure.
Right? So here in the middle of the recession is one of the best growth opportunities that person's ever had. Had we not had that recession, he would not have that opportunity. And I think that is something that a lot of people just miss with the recession. I mean, maybe perhaps this is one of these economic recessions that's just caused by non-economic reasons. Maybe it's all these other things that are going on in our country and the world right now that have people all sorts of upset, that are bringing us to think, oh, well, it must be the economy, stupid. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we're still employed. Maybe the business owners are really excited about the new opportunities that are coming in because this has all happened. And maybe this massive shift in direction could be one of the best opportunities we've ever had.
So a little bit of what I hear you saying, and I can't remember if I've recounted this allegory or fable or whatever you would call it, real quick, is the allegory of the old man at the edge of town, which is this person observed this old man sitting on his porch at the edge of town. Someone's coming through and says, "We're thinking of moving here. What type of people would we find here?" And he says, "Tell me about the people where you came from." And they were, the worst people, the worst type. They were backbiters. They'd never come to your aid, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And he says, "You'll probably find the same type of people here." And then those people are like, "Well, thanks for letting us know." They move on. Someone else shows up and they ask the old man, "We're thinking of relocating to this town. What kind of people would you find here?" And he says, "What kind of people were where you came from?" He says, "Oh, the most wonderful people in the world. They'd give you the shirt off their back. They'd just come to help you in time of need." He says, "You'll probably find the same type of people here." And I think the moral to that story is, recession or not recession, you find what you're looking for in it. You can find opportunity or you can find doom and gloom. Exactly. That's kind of what I hear you saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I love that story. I love that allegory. You can repeat that allegory to me as many times as you want because, yes, that's exactly what you're going to find. Yeah. And, in the economic headlines right now, you actually don't have to look very hard to find good news, but it's not going to make the news. You have to look.
It's not sensational enough.
It's not what sells the ads. It's not what glues you to the tube.
So, headwinds or no headwinds, the outcome of our discussion, as I'm seeing it, is possibilities and opportunities abound.
Maybe the best ever. Think about
even investment opportunities.
Oh yeah, think investment opportunities. Think about personal opportunities. Like I'm saying, you can travel to Europe for 20% off sale. But investment opportunities too. Think about the size of the industries that are going and the companies that are going through the biggest changes of the past 20 to 40 years. Energy. It's going through the biggest change right now this year that it's gone through in 40 years. And I'm not talking about, gas prices being really high or coming down really low, and I'm not talking about political gouging and accusations and all sorts of grandstanding. I'm talking about companies who are in the business of delivering energy and having huge opportunities all of a sudden laid on their table here in America where they could perhaps deliver all other than fossil fuel energy if that's the way they want to go, or they could go into, as many of them are, into carbon capture opportunities, or they could re-drill because this is what Europe, the most green of the parts of the world, needs in order to stay alive. That is a massive opportunity for the energy industry. It's a huge change, and these companies are going to make really good decisions, and they could all be divergent decisions, right? And we won't know in advance whether, this company over here doing that is the right decision compared to that company over there doing another thing, right? A massive investment opportunity, fantastic opportunities for employment, for new jobs, think about another one, defense. When has it been the case where you have such a huge need for defense where you haven't had a great investment opportunity? It's always been the case that when people decide that they need to build stuff to keep themselves safe, that people are employed and that money is made and that that result is achieved, right? And so it's, it was World War II in a very simple version of history that ended the Great Depression, right? It was the 1980s, America's ability to outspend the Soviet Union that brought down the Soviet Union. I mean, these are really simple, gross simplifications of history, but they're great investment opportunities. And these are both periods of time when equity markets, particularly in the United States, did fantastic. And these are happening right now, right in front of our eyes, despite all of the bad news around us. There are amazing, amazing investment opportunities and personal opportunities. And you know what? We still have food on the table. And there's all sorts of challenges that, maybe we won't have everything we always want, and the shelves aren't quite as full as they used to be. Maybe this is an opportunity to change our diet. Maybe this is an opportunity to spend more time outside. Maybe, there's all sorts of ways to just flip that exactly around and say, wow, not bad, man. Not bad. Things are working.
Right. No, and you'd expect to get something like this out of me. The two moments in history that you mentioned where what seemed like insurmountable challenges were overcome, both World War II and the defeat of communism, or the supposed defeat of communism. We still have communism, so I don't know that we actually defeated it. But nevertheless, the catalyst fueling those activities, those expenditures, those pursuits was liberty.
That's right.
And so I think, getting back to this earlier in this podcast where we cued the music, America is a great country because of our liberty, not because of our Federal Reserve, not because of our stock markets, not because of our tract homes. What makes America great is liberty. And so despite whatever headwinds, World War II, communism, stagflation, it's our ability to act and take advantage and work against headwinds that allows us to come out on top.
Exactly. Wow, well said, my friend. I don't know if we can conclude on any better note than that.
Thomas Jefferson couldn't, so why should we?
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. We had a great conversation. I know, Nate, I really enjoyed it. Did you enjoy yourself?
Absolutely.
I think we really enjoyed each other's company, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today. I look forward to meeting you in person or talking again real soon. Until then, create a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else. And join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through ANI Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.